Hello and welcome to this webinar, one of our NYSBDC Winter 24 Technology Series. We are so excited to have one of our own presenting today, Liam McMahon, who will be delivering his message on strategic team building, the unseen key to startup survival. I am your moderator, Jenny Alton from the New York Small Business Development Center Central Office. This webinar is brought to you by the NYSBDC network of 20 campus-based centers and many more outreach offices, which are located across New York State, along with a central office based in Albany. The NYSBDC is a U.S. Small Business Administration resource partner. Our free advising, education, research, and advocacy services are made possible by funding from the SBA, New York State, and our host campuses. So you know, this session is being recorded. We will share it with attendees in the next few days, along with a PDF copy of the slides in a follow-up email. Attendees are muted and will not be on camera today. Your chats will only be visible to me and our presenter, Liam. If you have any questions during the presentation, we would love to have you put those in the Q&A box as they come up. You can open Zoom's Q&A box from the bottom of your Zoom window. You'll see a Q&A button there. We will address questions at the end of Liam's presentation to make sure he has time to get through all of his fantastic material today. For specific questions that may take more time and detail to answer, or if we run out of time to answer all questions, we would love to have you get in touch with your local SBDC, through which you will have access to Liam's expertise. You can also reply to that follow-up email I mentioned previously to get further assistance. And so without further ado, I will turn the time over to Liam.
Thanks, Jenny. Thank you, everyone that's joining us today. This is a common topic for a lot of our tech clients that come up, which is strategic team building, the unseen key to startup success. So I usually always start off with a decent quote: "Great vision without great people is irrelevant." And we'll kind of get into this later, but really what we're driving down here is that your team is one of the most important parts of any good tech startup, and finding the right people is always key. It's frequently one of the more challenging questions that a lot of my clients have. Today we're going to go over kind of a simple way to make it a little bit easier to figure out who you need and not just leave it up to chance. So there's lots of reasons why your team matters. Unfortunately, for a lot of tech clients, this tends to be an overlooked aspect of their startup, but it's definitely one of the most essential ones out there. So why does it matter? So first off, bad team members hurt. So in essence, a bad hire can cause a lot of damage to a startup, especially a new one. In regards to simply the time it takes to hire them, all of that. So one of the most important, a couple of important things and a couple of important issues that we run into with hiring in general is that it costs time. So generally speaking, you have to spend time interviewing, onboarding them, setting up payroll, everything else. When you're a new startup, this is kind of, time is everything. If you're a startup doing SBIRs, you'll know that waiting for your funding to come through is always a big deal. And a lot of times you're stretched pretty thin. So any time that you have to waste on a bad hire that you're just going to get rid of later is generally time poorly spent. It costs money too. As far as like a regular hire goes, the Department of Labor estimated at around 30% of a first year's salary is going to, a bad hire will cost you roughly 30% of their first year salary. This is a big one, especially for tech companies, where a lot of times you're trying to bring people in at a higher price point. And with a short runway, you can easily burn through capital really quick on hires that don't generate any value for the company or really move your product development down the road further. Creates drama. So one of the other issues we run into frequently is that a bad hire can cause a lot of tension in small teams, especially. So quite frequently, what we'll see is a bad hire will come in, either they're brought on, a bad a team member is brought on that is grossly underqualified for the position, while people at lower levels within the organization are much more skilled, which creates a large amount of friction in the company, which as a result can often lead to even more exits from the company than just the one bad hire. So it's something we want to be aware of, that there's bringing someone on that isn't a good fit for your organization can cause a ton of damage. More importantly, team composition actually makes up a huge chunk of whether or not a company is going to be successful. So if we were looking at the findings of Idea Lab, timing was obviously viewed as one of the most important aspects of launching any product. And I'm sure most people here really recognize that timing is kind of everything in these businesses. That being said, the success of a team is also based heavily on, or the success of a company is also based heavily on the team composition. Having people that are skilled, motivated, willing to work, and really drive the vision of the company will really help you overcome a lot of the challenges that you will run into as a founder. So, we want to pay special attention to the team composition. The other thing to remember too is it can be really hard to predict timing, as I said. So, whereas a lot of the other stuff like our business model, our idea is really well within our control, timing is just kind of timing. There's been lots of good ideas we've heard about that just didn't come out at the right time, and later a new developer came out with it and the idea really took off. Teams, on the other hand, and who joins your organization, that's much, much easier to control. You can choose to bring people on board, you can choose to let them go. You're really not locked into this like you are with timing. So the real question is, what can we do about teams? This is the thing that most people struggle with because they tend to feel very out of control when it comes to who they bring on. And a lot of this has to do with business comes at you 100 miles per hour. So in essence, you're trying to add people that'll solve immediate problems without a lot of thought as to what that really looks like within your organization. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a couple steps in regards to how we kind of get a plan for bringing people on board before we just go out and willy-nilly recruit people. So the first thing to remember here is that we want to be systematic. So quite frequently when I'm advising clients, what I'll see is that they'll identify that they can't do this alone. I'm sure pretty much everyone in attendance has had that situation where you know that you need to add someone to the company, you don't know who, but you just have hit that roadblock where suddenly you recognize that you can't do this alone anymore. I can almost assure you that in every startup that I interact with that's a single founder, that will be a conversation that will come up at some point, is that how do I find the right person to bring on board, and how soon can I do it? So that's something that we want to bear in mind. So generally speaking, what will happen in this scenario is someone will simply grab the first person that they know that seems at least tangentially interested in their product and give them some role within the organization. Usually it'll be CFO, CTO. The titles really don't matter. Usually it's a very big title. And really not much more thought is given to the process than that. So essentially what we're proposing here, though, is that that's probably not the right way to do it. Frequently you end up with bad fits for your organization, and a lot of exits. This is especially concerning when you're dealing with the fact that a lot of these early members of a tech company are tending to get reimbursed or rewarded with equity from the organization. So we want to make sure that whoever we bring on is going to be well worth what we're giving them. And as probably everyone here knows, equity especially is everything in an early startup. So how can we be systematic about this? How can we sit down and make sure that the people we're bringing on are deserving of the title and are a good fit for what we're doing? It's pretty easy, actually. Well, I don't want to undersell it, but there's easier ways than others to do it. My preferred method is something as exciting as creating a rubric. For those of you from an academic background, you're probably well familiar with that. For those that aren't, this is going to be very similar to probably what you saw in college, with a simple grading rubric to figure out where people are at within your organization and the skill sets and where they fit in to the larger hierarchy. So how do we make a rubric? The first part is often the most difficult. So every organization is different. I can't tell you what is necessarily meaningful to your organization. I can only tell you that this is not something that you want to do quickly. So step one in creating the rubric is identifying core competencies within your organization. And generally speaking, I like to stick to 6 to 8. It's not too overwhelming for you. And once we get above that, it starts to get it kind of dilutes the whole process. So generally speaking, I would tell clients to select 6 to 8 core competencies that really matter for their organization. And as I said, this is different for everybody. So some companies may very much value analytical skills. Others may really value communication and creativity. One company I have worked with said that compassion, given that their product and how they deliver it, compassion is one of the first things that they really look for in people that they're onboarding. So you'll have to take some time. Generally, I say take a couple days, sit down and really think what is meaningful to you as a founder. Mind you, there may be some differences a little bit in different parts of your company, but there should be, generally speaking, about 6 to 8 that kind of cover everybody. So once we've identified the core competencies, what next? If you want, you can share some of your most important core competencies for your organization within the chat. Don't feel like you have to. This is definitely one that I recommend giving some real thought to, but if you have one that really defines your organization, feel free to share it if you'd like. So what next? So now we're going to work on selecting titles within a company. Much like competencies, generally speaking, they can be whatever you want. I tend to advise clients not to pick titles that are too out there or too screwy, especially since it can create a lot of confusion down the road if you're trying to recruit people. Although I know a lot of companies have gotten very creative in the titles that they give those that they're onboarding. Usually we stick to like 5 or 6 different levels within the organization, and think of this as basically ranks. Like, where does someone fall in skill set and what are they performing on? So again, this is very company specific, probably not as overwhelming as trying to think about what are the core competencies important to your organization, but it's still helpful because these titles will be what define your employees or your team members going forward. So now that we have that all together, we do the most simple thing possible and we just create a rubric. You can do this on the computer, or you could even do it paper and pen, whatever works best for you. Generally speaking, we lay this out in boxes. I usually do it in Excel, and with the skill set being the horizontal and the levels being the verticals. So what do we do from here? This is the hard part. This is generally the most challenging part, and the part that I always recommend that people reach out to their SBDC advisor to kind of discuss, because it's at times hard to do alone. So at this level, at this phase, we start laying out what each competency would look like. They should be distinct from one another. So there should be a difference between, if we go back, a staff member versus a manager. So these should be distinct levels with distinct expectations. Again, this is a lot of times easier to do before you bring on a lot of team members, because you're not filling them based on what they're doing now. I usually recommend doing this process before you even bring on your first team member, at least to flesh out a rough idea of what you're going to be looking for and the expectations you have for the people you bring on. So in this case, at a vice president level, would be executive. We would be looking at someone that's really looking at organizational wide. This would be the top tier within this company. And we're looking at someone that looks at stuff from an organizational wide perspective. So in this case, they're coordinating projects across the entire organization. They're also working with external stakeholders. So they're reaching out, networking with other companies, establishing relationships. They're also directing internal teams. So someone at the top tier is likely someone that's going to be the people making the large organizational wide decisions. They're going to be pretty much the ones under you as the founder, the owner, the CEO, if you will. So these are kind of your key big picture people. On the other hand, we'll bump down to the bottom of the list. We have a staff member here. And when we look at how they perform with teamwork, they maintain healthy camaraderie with the team. They provide support to other team members, and they reach out to other team members for assistance with larger projects. So why is there such a big difference? Well, the staff member is really only working on probably one project. They're looking at things, through that lens and at a very small scale. Both of them have value, but they're both performing very different roles within this, necessary competency. And they're kind of graded differently as a result. We would look at a staff member that's able to set up external relationships with, partner companies very differently than a vice president who's only able to maintain a healthy camaraderie within the team. We would expect the vice president to be able to function in all of these staff roles. We wouldn't expect a new person at the lowest level of your organization to be able to do the same. So what does this mean? Expectations level should always be clearly defined. I generally recommend the more concrete you can make them, the better, because we're going to evaluate people on this. So you want to ensure that every level's expectations are clearly defined and they're distinct. As I mentioned earlier, every company has different needs. So frequently, very frequently, technical skills are a large part of any new early stage tech startup. And what that means is that we want to focus on your skills as an AI developer are going to be very different than your skill set as a biotech company. But there might be specific skill sets that people need, and they need to perform them at a higher level as they move up the organization. You may find that at the vice president, that more of that executive leadership role, that they don't need necessarily to be as deeply entrenched in the singular skill of maybe running a lab, running the lab or working in the lab, but they need to understand how the lab operates on the big picture. So again, every company is going to have different needs. Your competencies are going to be individualized to you. I really recommend sitting down with an advisor. A lot of times we have a lot of hands-on experience working with you and a pretty solid understanding of your organization, so we can at least sit there and discuss, what we see, as an external observer about the competencies that you seem to value. And finally, remember, this is a living document. Companies, organizations change over time. So, expect that there may be some revisions to this. This is not, once you set it at day one, that it's going to be something that sticks with you forever. But remember that a lot of times those early hires and those early expectations and that early culture you set up tends to define the company for a very long time. So again, be very mindful about the competencies you select, because a lot of times you're establishing the larger framework of um, your organization's culture. So because it's me and Jenny, I'm actually going to take a moment. If anyone has any questions, again, feel free to share them in the chat. We can try and answer them while we're in this gap. But if anyone has any questions about core competencies or anything like that, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, we'll give people a minute to drop any questions that they might have so far in the presentation. Feel free to do that. You could do it through the chat. We also have our Q&A box there. And just to remind people, as Liam is talking about sitting down with an advisor to work through these items, we have these high quality, no cost services that are made possible through our funding from the SBA, from New York State, from our host campuses. And so that is why we are able to offer this high quality service at no cost. And so I did drop in the chat a link if you would like to get in touch with your local center to help you in going through this process and figuring out how you want to make this work for your particular organization, because Liam is showing a great structure. But if you want help really getting into the details, then get in touch with your local center, and all of our local centers with technology clients can work with Liam to get that extra expertise that Liam has and help you get into those details and get things really figured out. Okay, so Liam, for a company in need of partners who have crucial skills that the company needs, besides money and equity, what is the best pitch to give them?
Oh man. I mean, obviously money and equity is always the best pitch. But it's my best pitch is opportunity, realistically. Equity to me is, generally speaking, that is kind of what you're offering them, is the opportunity or the future upside of your organization. I don't put this I didn't put this in the slides, but generally speaking, especially for an early stage startup, one of the biggest groups of people I'd recommend avoiding are what I have colloquially heard as mercenaries. And what that means is basically you don't want somebody that's only going to join your startup that has like if you're the only one running it, or there's like three of you. Having someone join because because of the money or the equity is probably not going to work out great. So basically what that means is, like, yeah, if someone's only coming in for money and equity, they're only going to stay there as long as they think that there's some value to this. The pitch should really be the mission and what the company's doing in this scenario, especially for early stage founders. When you're getting into the size of like 50, 100 people on your team, then it's definitely going to be the money and you've raised a lot of capital. But at this early stage, realistically, the pitch should be, this is what we're creating. We think that we could achieve this, and this is our vision and our mission. You guys all kind of know that there's a lot of sacrifice here. There's going to be a lot of late nights, and there's going to be a lot of ramen consumed before you really get to the point that you're raising large amounts of funds. So I strongly recommend really avoiding those mercenaries and really pitching the idea on, what is the future potential? What is the mission? What is the vision of the company? Hopefully that answered that question for you.
Yes, thank you, Liam. We did have a comment as well of someone who's on the call today who is a freelancer and not interested in hiring employees per se, but this person commented that they can see how this model can be adapted for choosing collaborators if you're in that scenario where you need to find people to work with, not necessarily to hire.
I'm glad it's useful there too. I'd actually be curious to know how that works. That's kind of a good use for it. So I don't see any other open questions. So I guess we'll drive on. I'm usually always very brief in these things. So we'll get the class out of here a little early maybe. So what do we use a rubric for? First and foremost, we want to refer to it. So anytime that we're bringing somebody on into the organization, the question shouldn't be, do I like this guy? Because a lot of times, or woman, a lot of times you'll meet people that you really like. And while that's nice and team fit is important, we want to make sure that they're also performing at the level that you need them to be at. So anytime we're trying to make the decision of, is this person going to join my team? Are they going to become like an early stage executive? We need to ask the question, are they actually there? So in essence, we want to make sure that they fit within that rubric. So you should be asking questions of them that would kind of help you determine where are they within that level in the organization. Next up, if you have team members already, the goal here is to sell it. So your current team should understand all of the expectations that that position has. There's a real tendency for every founder to want to be very secretive about these internal documents. But again, what that leads to is a lot of team members that are very, very unsure of how they should be performing within the organization. And, what gets them to that next level? As was mentioned in the question, a lot of times equity, pay, stuff like that is all on the table. And equity, because a lot of people are coming in with that goal of that future upside, is a big part of this. You want them to understand early on, what does this actually look like if to get to that next level where there may be more equity involved within the company. You also want to make them feel confident that people that you bring on are being brought on for a reason. So you're not bringing on, Ted, who was your, former college roommate, that he's going to be your CTO, but the most experience he has with Python is a, online workshop that he only did half of. We want to avoid those type of recruitment drives. So in essence, selling it helps your existing team understand that you're bringing people on for a reason and that they're at that position within the organization. And again, you should be using the rubric consistently. So frequently, especially at a lot of early stage startups that I've noticed have tended to use like SBIRs, STTRs, you'll bring on students as assistants, things of that nature. And realistically, they're probably going to be performing at the lowest level within your organization. Once in a while, you have one that hits it out of the park, but frequently you have, younger people that are just kind of like stepping out into the world at this new startup. So in essence, once if they're in at a low level, we want to understand if they want to stick around, we want them to understand what it takes to move up within the organization. Again, setting these expectations early lets them know where they need to be performing at. So if they want to manage people or want to be a manager or director within the organization, these staff members understand early on what that actually looks like and what it'll take for them to get there. And that's really key. It gives them a reason to stick around. It gives them a reason to work towards something and work on improving their skills without feeling like it's a secret. So again, really emphasizing all of this. This rubric it's a living document. It's something you refer to frequently, but most importantly, it's something that we want to ensure that everyone knows about. Openness in the organization about expectations is really critical. So once you make this, once it's something you feel like you're comfortable with and kind of comfortable utilizing, you should be open about what that actually looks like. But that's not the only thing. So even with the rubric in place and these guides there, we want to make sure that there's some other stuff to keep an eye on as we kind of begin bringing people into the organization. So first and foremost, don't bloat the title. This is probably consistently one of the largest problems that I see with any new tech organization. As I mentioned before, we end up with a lot of people that come in, for example, they'll bring their college roommate in and make them CFO, and The only finances they've ever managed are their own. So we want to be really careful about who we recruit into an organization. If someone's coming in with limited like programming skills, has never really worked in a large project, we want to bring them in at a low level. We can always promote them. And when we are promoting them, we want to base those decisions on performance, not how likable they are. So in essence, never make someone a VP that isn't at the VP level. By the same token, you don't necessarily want to make someone a low-ranking employee when they're able to perform much higher. So again, don't over-title people. Don't give them something that's bigger than what they are capable of doing. Generally, the outcome for this that we've seen at other organizations is that titles become so bloated that then you have to start creating new titles within an organization to really figure out how to rectify that there's just a lot of people with really important names but aren't performing at that skill set. A good example was I worked with an organization a while back where everyone within it was titled as a director. At some point, they had brought on somebody that wasn't really super qualified to be a director. And then as a result, everyone quickly realized this person wasn't up to the task. And so they continued to title everyone as a director, because if everyone was a director, at least then that person's not over titled for the position. So the director position immediately became the lowest tier within the organization because that's what they start everyone at now. And those are things that are incredibly difficult to backtrack on later. It's much easier to promote somebody than it is to demote them. Most importantly, this is going to be for those really, really early people that you bring on, is have a vesting schedule. So anyone that does join the organization that's getting equity, again, as was mentioned in the one question, if you're getting equity of any sort or giving it out, there should be a vesting schedule that comes with that. I've had a significant number of companies scuttled due to lack of having a vesting schedule. The reason for this is it avoids what we call the free rider problem. So people come into the organization and aren't a good fit and then exit very quickly. Without a vesting schedule, what happens is they leave with the equity that's given to them right out the gate, despite never having performed. Generally speaking, if you're bringing on an executive as like one of your first people, you're usually looking at, I've seen anywhere from 1% to 5% equity in the company, depending on their title. I've seen it lower than that too, but you don't want someone to just walk out the door after 6 months with 1% of your company. Again, that's all valuable. And if you're one of those people that reaches that big success in IPOs, the person's going to get a huge payday for 6 months of work. So having a vesting schedule creates a sense of fairness within the organization, that you're not carrying a bunch of people that didn't contribute, and also encourages them to stay longer within the organization. So what else do we do? So we're going to evaluate people often. And we want to measure performance and how someone's doing when you bring them in. So we want to review it based on the rubric to really see, are they performing at where they need to be at? Are they performing lower than that? I generally don't recommend doing it once a year. I know everyone's super busy, but teams really drive success. And if you don't have time to monitor them and ensure they're doing what they need to, you're very likely going to end up wasting a lot of money. So usually 6 months or quarterly is a better fit, because you can see that there's a problem and rectify it sooner. The other thing is you want to be mindful about how long you give someone to correct performance. So good rule of thumb that's been taught to me is that a low-level staff member, you can kind of work with them to help them develop if they're not quite there. It's costly and it's kind of a risk you're taking, but it's something that you can do. That being said, if you have someone that's an executive or in a high-level management position, I generally, given their cost and what they're asking for, especially with the vesting schedules and things of that nature, I generally don't recommend having them stick around any longer than necessary. Someone that's a CFO either performs or they don't. There's not a lot of on-the-job training expected in that position. So again, going back to the rubric, as we see, let's say, a lower level staff member performing, we want to recognize that. So we want to encourage that, whether it's financial rewards, general recognition, some type of equity. We want to encourage growth too. So I see a question in the chat actually, where this person has 6 employees and they all make a little over minimum wage. They want to hire a manager. How do I determine if one of these people is the right fit for management versus hiring a new manager? So that's kind of the big question, right? So, and if someone's performing, we want to recognize them and encourage them to grow into that position. So first off, I would outline, what does management look like? What does that management position look like? And then take the time to outline that to all the staff members and encourage them to grow into that position. If there's people that are interested and want to move up to management, you should be encouraging that type of development. So if they want to take on new responsibilities, they're able to based on fixed expectations. So in essence, are they hitting all those markers that you've established for a management position? Like I said, it's expensive to hire people. It's time consuming. The recruiting is hard, and there's potentially going to be some churn for those new hires. So if you have people that are established, like the organization, then you definitely should encourage that growth and encourage them to continue to develop within the organization. I moved through this much faster than I anticipated. Oh, sorry about that, Jenny.
No, don't be at all. It's great.
I'm going to open it up to questions. I'd really like to get your feedback and know, what questions you have, what struggles you have with core competencies, really how you might utilize this or how you're hoping to utilize this with your organization. So any questions you have, fire away.
Right. We will be watching the Q&A box in the chat. We have another comment that says, it sounds like a part of this, once you've built the rubric, is making sure that job descriptions are specific and that everyone knows who's responsible for what.
Oh, I didn't get that one. Was that the question?
It's in the chat.
Okay.
It's in the chat for you.
I don't know. Freelancer. It sounds like a part of this rubric is making sure that the job descriptions are specific and that everyone. Yep, that's exactly it. So we want to make sure that they're very specific and that everyone knows who's responsible for what. It also, like I said, it gives opportunities for growth too. So in essence, they want to know at this level, I'm performing if I'm hitting these markers, but if I have aspirations to move up, that I can, if I perform at this level, I can get there, and that they can talk to you and kind of determine what they need to actually grow. And it's a very open, it's not a secret, it's a very open process. I see someone else ask, when do you know to hire a high level person versus a coordinator to help you manage your own time better? That's a great question. It depends. So it really depends on what type of responsibilities you're looking for them to fulfill. I've been shocked by the number of people that think that they need to hire, a CTO when really what they need is like a mid-level programmer or something of that nature. It would really depend on what you're hoping to accomplish from this role and how much responsibility you're looking to offload. So in essence, those really high-level people, they're tending to make like real organizational critical decisions for you. They may be establishing relationships with new people. Some of them I've met have, contacts of their own in regards to investors and partner companies. If you're looking for someone that's just kind of helping you manage time, they're probably better at a coordinator level. Whereas if they're kind of establishing those relationships and setting policy within the organization and really like helping to determine what is the direction forward, then they probably are a high level person. It's really going to come down to needs, honestly. Um, and again, there's no shame in bringing someone in at a lower level position and promoting them up. It's much, much, much easier to promote somebody up than, again, to hire someone that's a high level person and realize, oh man, this is only a coordinator. And now everyone in my company is a vice president because I can't backtrack this. I hope that kind of answers that question.
Yeah, and this sounds like something with which it would be very helpful to get an outside perspective, like one of our advisors, to kind of help you identify what is that exact need that your company has and what might be the best role to help fulfill those needs. So that was an excellent question. We'll leave just a minute more if anybody else has any other follow-up questions here. And in the meantime, I will tell you that we do have a follow-up survey after this webinar. We would love to get your feedback and know what was beneficial to you today and what other topics you are interested in seeing in our educational offerings. So when we shut down the webinar, that will pop up on your screen, and we would love it if you have just a couple minutes to fill that out and give us some feedback. All right, so Liam, I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. Do you have any parting thoughts that you would like to give?
Yeah, I do see one just popped up. I don't know if my
Oh,
question was
it did.
answered. Whether to
Oh,
promote
yep,
from
we did.
within. Yep.
Yep.
Whether to promote from within versus hiring. Again, it's going to partly depend on your organization. If you think that someone is performing at the management level, promoting from within is generally much more economical because there's not as much onboarding that goes into it, and you're kind of maintaining a lot of those skill sets. That being said, just going in and firing from the hip and just choosing someone of the 6 people to promote, probably not going to work well. So it really comes down to, you know, ideally what I like to promote from within always. Anytime I can promote from within personally, that's always a better decision, I think. Again, this is my own personal opinion on it. Largely because you don't have to do all the complicated stuff like teach them the organizational culture and all of that. That being said, there's lots of companies I've met where they just don't have anyone there that's really at that level. And at that point, you do have to bring that expertise in.
Thank you. Thanks for making sure that we caught that question fully.
Last minute.
Yes.
And just in case to give anyone an extra second, again, always reach out to your SBDC advisor if you have questions regarding this. I'm available across the state. So if you have a SBDC advisor in your location and you want to sit down and meet with me and your advisor, I'm more than happy to do so. That's very, very common for me. So feel free to reach out. Don't hesitate. I'm always happy to meet new clients from all around the state. It's very exciting. So anytime, just reach out to your advisor and let them know you'd like to have a conversation. I think that's it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for attending, everyone. Thank you, Liam, for fantastic information. As somebody in the learning side of things, I am a definite fan of rubrics. They make things very clear and really help to set those expectations from the get-go so that there is less confusion later on. So I am all for rubrics. This is a fantastic application of that tool. So several thank yous coming in. Amazing conversation. And with that, we will give you a few minutes extra back to your day and hope that you're able to carry this information into your business and let us know if we can help you. I dropped that link in the chat where you can get in touch with your local center. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.